The war on children, state incentives that destroy families. We're diving deep into something that strikes at the very heart of what makes us human. The sacred bond between parents and children. It's a topic that's been twisted, manipulated, and turned into a weapon by those who claim to serve the greater good. We'll uncover how systems meant to protect the vulnerable have instead become engines of separation, dependency, and control. Buckle up, because this one challenges some of the most cherished illusions about authority and benevolence. Before we get into the raw details, imagine this. A knock at the door from officials who say they're there for the child's best interest. A report based on hearsay or a minor disagreement over medical choices, education, or how you handle everyday parenting. Suddenly, your world shatters. Children removed, families torn apart not by clear evidence of harm but by vague standards that expand like an unchecked bureaucracy. That's the teaser. This isn't isolated. It's a pattern rooted in deeper agendas that view the family as an obstacle rather than the foundation of a free society. Now let's pull back the curtain on how this machinery really operates. It often begins with broad reporting mandates that encourage anyone, neighbors, teachers, doctors, to flag concerns, sometimes anonymously. Officials arrive with clipboards and broad discretion. Homes are searched without warrants in practice because refusing entry is spun as obstruction. Courts step in, but these aren't open trials with juries of peers. They're closed proceedings where hearsay carries weight, exculpatory evidence gets sidelined, and parents might meet their assigned counsel only minutes before a rushed hearing. Emergency removals happen fast, before full facts are tested, and once a child is in the system, the incentives kick in hard. The funding streams are designed in ways that reward intervention over preservation. Federal mechanisms pour billions into placements, services, therapies, and eventual adoptions, with bonuses tied to moving children toward permanent separation rather than reuniting them with kin. States and contractors get reimbursed more readily for out-of-home care than for supporting families in place. This creates a self-perpetuating pipeline where agencies, private providers, and the whole ecosystem thrive on volume. Children labeled with special needs or from certain backgrounds bring higher payouts. The result? Families destabilized by the very process supposed to help. Endless classes, testing, court dates that drain savings and time while the state accuses the parents of instability. Even kind foster placements can't erase the trauma of abrupt removal for a child who was safe at home. Logic dismantles the state's defense here. They claim these systems are essential to shield the innocent from abuse. Fair enough in cases of clear, severe harm, but data shows the majority of interventions fall under broad neglect categories, often entangled with poverty, lifestyle clashes, or ideological disputes rather than violence. If protection was the true north, why the resistance to stricter evidentiary standards, mandatory kinship placement first, or transparent proceedings? Why gag orders that prevent parents from speaking publicly while sealing records that could expose errors? Morally, this inverts justice. The presumption of innocence, the natural right of parents to raise their own, gets flipped. The state positions itself as superior parent, but it can't replicate the irreplaceable bond of blood and love. Removing a child for their own good, based on subjective best interest judgments, ignores that the greatest predictor of well-being is stable family ties, not bureaucratic oversight. Every unnecessary separation inflicts lifelong scars, attachment wounds, identity loss, higher risks in the system itself, where maltreatment reports persist. This isn't accidental inefficiency. It traces back to deliberate agendas that have long targeted the family as a rival to centralized power. In the writings of foundational communist thinkers, the family was dissected as a product of property relations, a bourgeois institution that must be transformed or abolished to clear the path for collective loyalty. Engels laid it out plainly. The monogamous family arose with private ownership, and true emancipation required dismantling it so inheritance and private bonds no longer competed with the state. Under Bolshevism, early experiments pushed communal child-rearing, easy dissolution of marriages, and state nurseries to redirect affections toward the collective. The nuclear family was hated as a source of individualism, tradition, and resistance to top-down control. It bred self-reliance, moral transmission outside the party line, and loyalties that couldn't be easily nationalized. State actors in these systems carried that absolute contempt forward. Families weren't seen as sacred but as obstacles to equality of outcome or social engineering. They promoted dependency, welfare structures that penalized stable two-parent homes through benefit designs and means testing, eroding the work ethic and family formation praised in older moral codes. The goal was clear: weaken the individual by fracturing the primary support unit, then position the state as provider, educator, and moral authority. This creates generations reliant on bureaucracy, less likely to question the hand that feeds or fails them. Morally, it's a profound violation, usurping the divine or natural order where parents steward their children, passing on values, resilience, and freedom. Logic exposes the hypocrisy. If the state truly believed in empowerment, it would strengthen families through removal of penalties on marriage and work, not subsidize alternatives that correlate with instability. The same impulse appears in international frameworks emphasizing the child's rights as paramount, often interpreted to override parental decisions on education, health, or upbringing. Best interest becomes a blank check for bureaucrats, sidelining the presumption that fit parents know and love their children best. This isn't neutral protection. It's a philosophical shift where the collective or expert class claims superior wisdom. Destroying family autonomy doesn't liberate, it atomizes people into manageable units dependent on authority structures. History shows the pattern. Regimes rooted in communist thought consistently attack the family because strong private bonds foster skepticism of state omniscience. They replace them with loyalty oaths, youth organizations, and propaganda that pit children against parents. Themes emerge powerfully here. The destruction isn't random but serves to consolidate power. By eroding the family, authority-oriented systems create a vacuum filled by dependency cycles, economic, emotional, educational. Parents lose confidence, communities weaken, and individuals turn to the state for what families once provided. Care and hardship, moral guidance, mutual aid. This mirrors the broader critique of how fiat-enabled spending bribes jurisdictions into compliance, expanding agency government beyond constitutional bounds. Morally, it's theft, not just of children but of the human experience of sovereignty within the home. Reasoning demands we reject it. Natural rights pre-exist the state. The family is prior to politics. Any system that treats children as chattel for funding formulas or ideological experiments fails the test of justice. Consider the Kafkaesque reality families face. A vitamin refusal or coatless play in mild weather triggers reports. Doctors or schools probe beyond medicine into worldview conflicts, acting as mandated informants. Once involved, compliance demands, classes, monitoring create the very instability used against you. Reunification becomes a moving target while adoption incentives hum in the background. Children in care face their own perils. Disrupted attachments, overmedication for manageability, placement instability. The state argues safety overrides all, but sheer logic counters. If safety were paramount, prevention funding would dwarf placement reimbursements, kinship would be default, and outcomes data would drive reform rather than excuses. Morally, the hubris of declaring one's bureaucracy better than imperfect but loving parents is staggering. It denies the resilience forged in real families, the forgiveness, the unique love that no paid professional replicates. Quotes from the era illuminate the intent. Communist foundational texts described bourgeois marriage as exploitative, a system of concealed community of women tied to property, to be swept away. The family was portrayed as the site where private interests resisted the collective good, breeding inequality through inheritance and affection. State actors echoed this hatred, implementing policies that treated parents as temporary custodians subject to expert override. One doesn't need conspiracy when the doctrinal record is explicit. The family must yield so the new order prevails. This agenda persists in modern forms. Expanded surveillance through data centers and digital tracking, school policies bypassing parents on sensitive issues, welfare designs that discourage intact homes. The absolute disdain for family autonomy reveals itself in resistance to transparency and due process reforms. Authority-oriented thinking assumes the expert state knows better, but experience and reason prove otherwise. Families, for all their flaws, are the proven incubator of responsible, free individuals. Centralized alternatives breed conformity, resentment, and cycles of dependency. If this episode hit hard and opened your eyes to the real battles families face, hit like, share it with every parent and truth seeker you know, subscribe for more unfiltered deep dives, and drop a comment with your thoughts or stories. Your voice fuels the resistance. In the end, the path forward is reclamation. Prioritize family preservation as the default, with removal reserved for verifiable imminent harm backed by open evidence. Dismantle perverse financial incentives that reward separation. Restore due process, warrants, confrontation of accusers, jury elements where liberty is at stake. Culturally, reject the notion that the state rears better than parents. Support structures that bolster self-reliance. Sound economics without fiat distortions, communities over bureaucracies. This isn't radical. It's returning to the moral foundation where individuals and families thrive without permission from distant authorities. Thanks for joining me on this exploration. If these truths resonate, dig deeper into the mechanics yourself. Question the systems claiming to protect while they erode the bonds that truly sustain us. Share this with someone navigating these battles or simply seeking clarity. Stand firm for the natural order that no authority can justly replace.